The addition of Tier 7 for aviation more or less confirmed to us that War Thunder intends to extend its timeline to new eras and new generations of fighter aircraft. The addition of Harriers back in new power was a sign of things to come, and Red Skies confirmed that this was the case. This is actually the lead cause as to why I decided to start my How to Implement series. So now the question of Gen 4 aircraft looms. Is War Thunder ready for Generation 4 aircraft? To put it bluntly, no. They are far from ready to implement any of the vehicles I've discussed in my videos, save perhaps for the F-111 Aardvark. While there's so many nitpicks I can point out that Gaijin needs to do before adding Gen 4 aircraft, I've condensed it into 5 main things. While there are more, of course, that can be fixed within the game to accommodate these aircraft and their daunting capabilities, I would say that these 5 major categories are a good start. First off would be maps. I think the most ridiculous part of playing Jets since New Power was getting queued into a map like Malta or Hokkaido to fight opponents after 30 seconds. It's no longer akin to a knife fight in a phone booth, it's more akin to having a sniper match in a closet. Aircraft with AIM-7s having enemies on their scope after a few minutes. Afghanistan was a good start, but it allowed people to just rush the airfield. It's another thing I'd like to be improved on. Remove the enemy airfield icon on the map. It's one of those things that just help the opposing team chase the aircraft to their own airfield. Currently, the maps we have are too small, though I feel Gaijin intends to be that way given that they increased fuel consumption from afterburner use. So how would Gaijin go about adding larger maps? I suggest taking maps from notable air engagements in the Cold War like Vietnam, Korea, and the Gulf War to have an idea how huge Air RB maps ought to be. This ensures missiles like AIM-54 Phoenix, R-77, and R-27ER don't become point-and-click missiles because the distances are too small for them to fully expend their energy. This also brings me to another tangent. Bring back courier-only maps like Midway and the New Guinea map. I understand that the New Guinea map was removed because one side had air spawn and the other had an airfield takeoff and made it very unbalanced. Hear me out. No air spawn for carrier aircraft. Gaijin should make it so that carrier-capable aircraft are the only ones allowed to queue on carrier maps, and non-carrier-capable aircraft can be on the land-based part of New Guinea. Push the carriers back to give both teams time to gain altitude. It would be preferable if the New Guinea map was 50 by 50 kilometers with half the map being land and the other half being just sea for aircraft carriers. A portion of the suggestion inspired by the F-14 Tomcat. I love to have a map where Tomcats take off from the Persian Gulf and dogfight over Iraq. The next would be mechanics. While Gaijin has implemented certain mechanics that are crucial, such as basic missile kinematics and basic radar mechanics, I feel that in terms of actual 4th gen mechanics, the game is still severely lacking. Mechanics such as missile course optimization, which includes lofting paths and energy mechanics. The main reason why missiles like the AIM-7E and AIM-7E2 perform differently than the Skyflash, despite apparently similar properties, is the Skyflash has more total energy off the rail than the AIM-7E2, which is why the AIM-7E2 is easier to maneuver against compared to a Skyflash. While I'm glad Gaijin really put effort to consider notching, they should, considering that's the only way to beat pulse Dopplers at the moment, they should improve radar mechanics overall. An example is the FGR2's Velocity Search mode with a pulse Doppler, where ACM mode locks onto ghost targets or just swaps targets to other targets out of nowhere. In line with the previous suggestion of larger maps, it would be nice to have drop tanks as well. Doesn't have to have keys to drop it, just drop them automatically when they're used up. With the topics of mechanics on the table, the current semi-TDM mechanics of Air RB should heavily be revamped and confirmed to fit modern aircraft. I could cover in details in a separate video how modern Air RB would work, but the summary of it is objective-oriented modes. I don't think it's enough that we just plow preset units on the ground and the ground RB damage models that exist on RUR is a step in the right direction. I would even extend this to ground RB, and the data'd capture the point variations, but ground RB has less room to work with, and new game modes will require new vehicles to be introduced. And the final aspect of mechanics is the matchmaking mechanics. The semi-mixed system of Gaijin, where there's really not a preset lineup but rather just a zero-sum team composition, by which I mean whatever nation isn't in the other team is most likely on this team. I propose NATO and allies versus bloc and allies. NATO German aircraft can be with NATO and likewise with East German aircraft. Gaijin, all I'm saying is, if your matchmaker can detect bombers and limit them to 4 per match, I think you can detect what aircraft Germans are queuing with. It simplifies fighting enemy aircraft to a sort of doctrine when facing or NATO or bloc aircraft. Also, I recommend reducing players in matches from the current player counts per match to something as small as 4v4. This not only reduces queue times, it opens up War Thunder to more objective-oriented gameplay and will not need to increase map sizes as much. Gaijin has lost their enthusiasm to provide us with fun events that aren't April Fool's events. We used to have stuff like the Guardian Angel, World War II Chronicles, Battle of Britain, and so much more. Battle of Britain would have been more interesting now that we have playable ships along with World War II Chronicles, but it seems Gaijin's crafting events and Operation Summer and Winter are just grindfests intended to attain a goal rather than be a fun process. I hope the next World War mode includes a Vietnam-based conflict to fully utilize all the vehicles we can already use. When Gen 4 aircraft are added, they should open up to more events like the Iran-Iraq War, Gulf War, and more conflicts around the world. On top of events, event rewards should also be stuff that's actually worth having, and not meta-slave vehicle from the big four that people only desire because it's got an overpowered aspect to it, or it's quick to jump to high tier. The most notorious examples of these rewards would be the F5A of the recent crafting event, the Class 3P of Operation Winter 2020, and the Buccaneer S1 of the Summer Landing event. The F5A hype for the US has already been superseded by the F5C and F5E. People barely knew that the Thyssen-Henschel TH800 platform even existed and was only added because it was an easy Tier 6 German vehicle. If I were to suggest event vehicles to give away, it should be vehicles from other nations that can't fit into the trees. Instead of the F5A, it should have been the CF101 or the Soko G4 Super Galeb. And for tanks, vehicles like the Romanian TR-85 and the WC-122 would make for great event vehicles. Fourth would be the economy. We're going to talk about the elephant in the room, repair costs. When the first Generation 4 aircraft dropped and obviously wiped the floor, they're gonna pump the repair costs up to high heaven like they did with the MiG-21 BIS, F-4 Phantoms, and F-86 F-2 Sabre when it first came out. If I had it my way, repair costs shouldn't go over 10,000 Silver Lions, especially in a game where half the time you die is due to the spotting system being stupid. That includes the bombers. I don't believe that TU-4 or B-29 deserve that higher repair cost just because they net a lot of SL with their bombing. No player deserves to lose more than 10,000 SL a game before paying for their expended weapons just because RNG decided to go against them on that match. If that's too much for Gaijin, I also proposed before a dynamic SL and RP system that depends on your battle rating. If you're a top tier, you get no bonus RP and reduction to repair costs. If you are 0.3 BR below top tier, you get 25 bonus in RP and 25% reduction in repair cost. If you're 0.7 BRs below top tier, you get 50% bonus in RP and 50% reduction in repair cost. If you're fully up tier, you get 75% bonus in RP and 75% reduction in Silver Lions. It's my way of making up tiers more rewarding for players who actually sit through it. Next for economy would be research costs and purchase costs. For this one, I'm glad that Gaijin is keeping their word and maxing the research out at 400,000 RP. and reducing the research costs for other vehicles as newer vehicles come along. The 400,000 RP is so daunting to some players, especially some free-to-play players, but it's not undoable. For regular play, I can knock out 400,000 RP in 3 days with premium time, if I'm in, which is done with an aircraft, or 3.5 days if I'm with tanks with premium time. With talismans or premium vehicles, I can do it in about a day for aircraft, and in the Vigans case, 8 hours. For tanks, I still do it in 2.5 days or 3 days. When Gen 4 aircraft arrive, they should retain the same cost as the current top tier planes just for uniformity. I've emphasized these in my How to Implement series, and I hope that Gen 4 doesn't deviate that much in terms of research points. In terms of purchase and crew costs, I believe instead of lowering them, as 1 million per vehicle sounds awful with the economy and whatnot, is to just increase the SL payout for vehicles, especially ground vehicles. For reference, the M1A2 Abrams has an SL reward of 195% with premium, while the F4E has 345%. Some will argue that it's fine because your RB only uses one vehicle, while ground RB uses all types of vehicles. I argue that it's beside the point. Tanks are the primary vehicles in ground RB. You can't spawn in aircraft right out of the blue, and oftentimes aircraft are difficult to spawn in due to SPAA, lack of spawn costs, or so on and so forth. My opinion, it's just best to raise the ground vehicle RP and SL reward rates to that of aircraft of equivalent BR and tier. This will do wonders not only for the economy, but also for player retention. Having to play certain vehicles just because they are SL printers are often disheartening and a cause of burnout and fatigue for players. Finally, we go to the last part, squads. Team play is an important factor in winning games for War Thunder. You're more likely to win when you are communicating with your teammates, and communication is better with people you are squadded with. While squadrons are already rewarded for team play with squadron vehicles, I believe that there should be squadron exclusive features that can be utilized. Features such as data link, buddy spotting, buddy lacing, and so on. The most the squads can make out of this in ground battles are when laser designators are used to direct paveways and other laser guided equipment. As for the War Thunder representation of data link, I'd like to introduce a feature called Squad Spot, acting like the scouting feature for light tanks, but it works for all types of ground vehicles, but only your squad mates can see your scout. If you have a light tank on your squad, that they can then relay the squad spot to the team with their regular scouting feature. There's so much more ideas I have for squads, but the final feature would be squad mates that capture the same point should not have a spawn point penalty that happens when the entire team sits on one capture point. Whew, that's a long one. I'm well aware that half the things in this video are wishful thinking, but I believe these are what is necessary to bring about Generation 4 aircraft with them interacting with ground vehicles. So that's that. We'll start with Season 2 of How to Implement with the really tasty vehicles and some non-Generation 4 aircraft. Don't you worry, I'm not going to do Generation 5 aircraft. God knows it's more complicated and might even warrant a longer video than this. Thanks for watching again. This is the Dr. MD, leading for landing.